Forgive me, sir.
The courtroom fell silent except for one sound, the quiet sobbing of a man who hadn't cried in years. Standing before the bench in clothes that hung loose on his gaunt frame, Marcus Webb clutched a crumpled citation in his trembling hands. His weathered face, marked by too many nights under highway overpasses and too many meals skipped, was streaked with tears. Judge Frank Caprio leaned forward in his chair, and what happened in the next 15 minutes would restore an entire courtroom's faith in humanity. I'm Adam Broderick, court reporter for the Providence Journal, and in my 23 years covering the Providence Municipal Court, I've witnessed thousands of cases. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what unfolded that cold February morning. Marcus Webb was 62 years old, though he looked closer to 80. The parking citation he held was for $75, an amount that might as well have been $75,000 for a man who counted his wealth in aluminum cans. He had been sleeping in his 1998 Honda Civic, the last remnant of a life that had slowly unraveled after a factory closure, a divorce, and a series of choices that led him from a comfortable middle-class existence to the streets of Providence. "Mr. Webb," Judge Caprio began, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of authority and compassion that had made him beloved throughout Rhode Island. "I see here you received a citation for expired registration and parking in a residential area overnight. Can you tell me what happened?" Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard, fighting to maintain composure. The courtroom, usually filled with the ambient noise of shuffling papers and whispered conversations, had gone completely still. Even the court officers, who had seen it all, stood motionless. "Your Honor," Marcus finally managed, his voice hoarse and breaking. That car is my home. It's all I have left in this world." The words hung in the air like a confession, like a prayer, like a desperate plea all at once. I watched Judge Caprio's expression shift, not with judgment, but with something deeper. His eyes, which had reviewed countless cases of parking violations and minor infractions, now focused entirely on the human being before him. "Tell me your story, Mr. Webb," the judge said, settling back in his chair. "Take your time. We're not in a hurry here." And so Marcus Webb began to speak. He told us about working for 31 years at the Cranston textile mill, arriving at 5 in the morning and leaving after dark, proud to provide for his wife and 2 daughters. He described the day the plant closed, how the managers gathered everyone in the cafeteria, and delivered the news that their jobs were gone, shipped overseas where labor was cheaper and American dreams were irrelevant. "I thought I'd find something else," Marcus said, his voice steadier now, as if the act of sharing his story was lending him strength. "I sent out hundreds of resumes. Hundreds, Your Honor. But I was 57 years old and nobody wants to hire a man my age when they can get someone younger for less money." His savings evaporated within months. The mortgage payments stopped. His wife, overwhelmed by the stress and the shame of their declining circumstances, left him. His daughters, who had families of their own to worry about, drifted away, not out of cruelty, but out of the uncomfortable helplessness that comes from watching someone you love sink and not knowing how to pull them back up. "I lost the house," Marcus continued, and now the tears were flowing freely. "Then I lost my apartment. Then I lost my dignity. But I kept that car. I kept it registered and insured as long as I could because it was my home. When you're living in a car, Your Honor, you need to move it around. You can't stay in one place or the police come. You become invisible, but you're not allowed to exist anywhere." I glanced around the courtroom. The prosecutor, a young woman named Jennifer Chen, who usually maintained professional detachment, was wiping her eyes. The court stenographer had paused, her hands hovering over the keys. Even the defendant waiting for the next case, a man who had come in complaining about his own citation, sat transfixed. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and cleaned them, a gesture I'd seen him do countless times, usually when he was thinking deeply about a case. When he put them back on, I could see his eyes were glistening. "Mr. Webb, when did you last have a hot meal?" the judge asked. The question seemed to surprise Marcus. I had soup at the shelter 3 days ago, Your Honor." "And where did you sleep last night?" "In my car, sir, down by the river. I try to find quiet spots where I won't bother anyone." Judge Caprio stood up, and this is when something extraordinary began to happen. In all my years covering his courtroom, I had never seen him leave the bench during proceedings. But he stepped down and walked toward Marcus Webb. "Mr. Webb," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm going to tell you something. You came before this court expecting judgment. You came here expecting to be treated like just another number, another case to be processed and dismissed. But I don't see a parking violation standing before me. I see a man who worked hard his entire life. I see a man who's fallen on circumstances that could happen to any of us. I see a man who deserves dignity and compassion." The judge turned to his staff. "Bailiff, I want you to dismiss this citation immediately. Not suspended, not reduced, dismissed entirely." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, but Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "Furthermore," he continued, "I'm going to make some calls. Providence has resources for veterans and displaced workers. We have programs to help people get back on their feet. Mr. Webb, you served your community through decades of hard work. Now it's time for your community to serve you." Marcus's knees seemed to buckle. A court officer stepped forward to steady him, but the tears, those tears that had started as quiet sobs, now flowed without restraint. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. I can't," he stammered between sobs. Judge Caprio placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Yes, you can, and you will, because you're not alone anymore." The judge looked directly at me then. He knew I was covering the story. "Mr. Broderick, I want you to follow up on this case. I want the Providence Journal to help us help this man, and anyone else who's fallen through the cracks." What happened next caught everyone off guard. The prosecutor, Ms. Chen, approached the bench. "Your Honor, if I may, I'd like to make a personal contribution to help Mr. Webb. Whatever he needs, food, clothing, temporary housing." Then the court stenographer spoke up, her voice trembling. "I'd like to help too." Within minutes, everyone in that courtroom, from the attorneys to the clerks to the other defendants, was offering assistance. One woman, who had come in to contest a speeding ticket, offered to hire Marcus to do maintenance work at her property management company. A young man waiting for his case announced he had an empty apartment he could offer for 3 months, rent-free. I watched as Marcus Webb, this man who had entered the courtroom invisible and forgotten, became surrounded by people who suddenly saw him, really saw him, as a human being worthy of compassion and help. Judge Caprio returned to the bench, but the usual formality of the court had dissolved into something more profound. "This," he said, addressing everyone present, "this is what justice should look like. Justice isn't just about laws and penalties. It's about recognizing our shared humanity. It's about understanding that any of us could be standing where Mr. Webb is standing, and hoping that if we were, someone would extend a hand rather than a citation." The judge paused, composing himself. "Mr. Webb worked 31 years at that textile mill. 31 years of early mornings and long days. He paid his taxes, he supported his family, he did everything right, and the system failed him. But today, we're not going to fail him again." Marcus finally found his voice again. "Your Honor, I don't know how to thank you. I came here today thinking, I thought this was the end. I thought this citation was going to be the thing that finally broke me. I couldn't pay it, and I knew they might impound my car, and then I'd have nothing. I'd be completely gone." His voice cracked. "I was standing outside this courthouse for an hour before I came in. I was thinking about just walking away, just disappearing. But I'm 62 years old, and I'm tired, Your Honor. I'm so tired of being invisible. I'm tired of being ashamed. I'm tired of feeling like I don't matter." Judge Caprio's voice was firm but gentle. "You matter, Mr. Webb. You've always mattered. And from this day forward, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that a room full of strangers stopped what they were doing because they recognized your humanity." Over the next 2 weeks, I followed Marcus Webb's story as it unfolded. The property manager, true to her word, hired him. The young man with the vacant apartment gave him a place to stay. Judge Caprio personally connected him with Rhode Island's Department of Human Services, which helped him access benefits he'd qualified for but never knew existed. The Providence Journal ran the story on the front page. Within days, donations poured in. Not just money, but job offers, furniture, clothing, and messages of support from across the country. Marcus Webb's story had touched something deep in the American consciousness. The fear that we're all just a few bad breaks away from losing everything, and the hope that compassion still exists in our institutions. But the most powerful moment came 3 weeks after that courtroom encounter. Marcus, looking healthier with some weight back on his frame and wearing clean clothes, returned to Judge Caprio's courtroom. This time he wasn't there as a defendant. He was there to volunteer. "Your Honor," Marcus said, his voice strong now, "I want to help other people who come through here feeling the way I felt. I want them to know they're not alone." Judge Caprio smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Mr. Webb, I think that's a wonderful idea." And so Marcus Webb became a regular presence in Providence Municipal Court, not as someone seeking justice, but as someone offering compassion. He'd sit in the back of the courtroom, and when someone came in who was clearly struggling, someone who looked defeated or ashamed, Marcus would approach them during a break and simply say, "I've been where you are, and I want you to know it's going to be okay." I interviewed Marcus 6 months after that initial court appearance. He was living in his own apartment now, working steady hours and rebuilding relationships with his daughters. He'd even started a support group for displaced workers. "That day in court," Marcus told me, "Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss a citation. He dismissed the shame I'd been carrying. He reminded me that my worth as a human being is undetermined by my bank account or where I sleep at night. He saw me when I couldn't see myself anymore." He paused, his eyes still capable of tearing up at the memory. "I walked into that courtroom thinking it was the end of my story, but it was actually the beginning of a new chapter. Judge Caprio gave me something more valuable than dismissing that fine. He gave me back my dignity." Standing in that courtroom that February morning, watching Marcus Webb break down in tears before a judge who chose compassion over protocol, I witnessed something rare in our modern world. I witnessed a moment when bureaucracy gave way to humanity, when rules were bent in service of what was right rather than what was written, and when a community rallied around one of its own. Judge Frank Caprio could have simply reduced the fine or offered a payment plan. That would have been within his legal purview and would have satisfied the requirements of the court. But he understood something deeper, that sometimes the law and justice aren't quite the same thing, and that a judge's greatest power isn't in the penalties they can impose, but in the mercy they can extend. As Marcus Webb left the courtroom that day, surrounded by new friends and offers of help, his citation dismissed and his future suddenly full of possibility, he turned back to look at Judge Caprio one last time. No words were exchanged. Just a nod of gratitude from a man who had been saved, and a nod of acknowledgement from a judge who understood that justice, real justice, is measured not in fines collected, but in lives restored. That's the story of the homeless man who stood before Judge Caprio, expecting judgment and finding compassion instead. It's a story that reminds us that behind every citation, every violation, every case number, there's a human being with a story, a struggle, and a soul worth saving. And it's a story that proves that even in our busiest institutions and our most bureaucratic systems, There's still room for the most powerful force in the universe, human kindness. If this story moved you the way it moved everyone in that courtroom, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Let's show Marcus and Judge Caprio that compassion still matters in this world. Drop a comment below telling me about a time someone showed you unexpected kindness when you needed it most. And subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like this out there. Stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, stories that remind us we're all in this together. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that there's still good in the world. Because Marcus Webb's story isn't just his story, it's a reminder that we all have the power to change someone's life with a simple act of compassion. Thank you for watching, and remember, be the Judge Caprio in someone else's story.